Hi folks, and welcome to my first video with me, Pritesh Patel. In this video I want to just quickly give you some advice, some tips to help you define what your website goals should be or could be, and then to how to actually go about measuring them, and then give you some advice and some tips on how to go about improving on those goals that you've just defined on your site. The first question to ask is, why are we creating this site? Why does this site even exist? It's important to understand this because you'll need to understand the purpose of this website in order to develop a robust, a really good brief for the agency or the web agency or the developers that you're hopefully going to get this site redesigned or built by. The purpose should hopefully help define what the design should look like, what the user journey will be, and the user experience in general. So in order to understand the why, you need to ask yourself, okay, well, what is the purpose of this website? One of the purposes could be to educate. It could simply be an educational type of site, in which case you'll need to think about, okay, well, how will we know that this site is actually educating the people, our audience that we've created this site for? It could be that you measure downloads, so downloads of checklists, worksheets, helpful guides. It could be downloads of processes, flowcharts, templates, things like that, where the material that you're offering for people to take away and learn from is ultimately what you're going to be measuring the success of. It could also be, okay, you've got lots of videos on that site that have demonstrations, how-tos, maybe some installation, advice type videos, in which case then you obviously be wanting to measure video views as well. If your site is a lead generation site, so many sites within the construction industry and building products in particular, they are lead generation types. We're trying to capture data of our visitors that come to the site, whether it be names, company names, email addresses, phone numbers, any form of contact where remarketing or further marketing can be done. In which case then you'll want to be measuring inquiries. You also, if you offer samples, you'll want to be able to measure samples. You may offer CPD sessions where you'll then want to be measuring CPD bookings also. So these are lead generation type goals. And there's no reason why you can't have a couple of these depending on the site that you have, but you want to again define this very, very early on, that this purpose of this website is to educate and generate leads, and what we're going to be measuring is downloads and sample requests. If you put that into a website brief for an agency, they can hit the ground running in terms of design. They can understand what's important to them. The worst thing is having a design or a wireframe come back to you. There's no call to actions, or it's the wrong call to actions. They're focused on increasing page views of case studies. Increasing page views of case studies isn't going to pay the bills. It's not going to pay your wages either. But generating leads, marketing to those leads, being able to sell to those leads, possibly will. You may have a site that's a problem-solving type site, so it's a support type site, where people come to the site because they've got your product, they've got your service, or maybe they've got a system already installed, a product, a system that's installed into their home or their building. It's a site that offers advice, guidance, answers to particular problems. They're typically called troubleshooting sites. They contain lots of FAQs, lots of how-to articles again. They may have calculators that help funnel people through from a particular problem through to an actual answer. So you want to be measuring calculations, or task completions is another good one for problem solving sites. On problem solving sites, you may also want to ask users, was this helpful? Yes or no. So you may want to measure how many yeses, how many no's. If you're getting particularly lots of no's for one type of article or video, you'll want to go away and improve on those and the answers that you've given to users. And then obviously, if you're selling products online through your website, you're selling products, parts, spares, whatever it may be, typically merchants and online e-commerce sites, you'll obviously be wanting measuring transactions and revenue, average order values, basket values, all those kind of typical and common e-commerce metrics. So hopefully that's given you a bit of, there are 4 purposes, most common purposes of sites. Most common that I deal with are the lead generation type sites, and starting to get a few more of these problem solving sites where it's a little bit more support orientated to reduce the burden of technical sales teams and try and become a little bit more self-sufficient on the user front. So they're the typical purposes of sites. There's some of the metrics, some of the goals that you want to be measuring on those on your site. Giving that information again to an agency or developer, we should be able to hit the ground running on a really good website brief. So how do you actually go about measuring these goals? Google Analytics, my favorite tool. Getting the basics set up in Google Analytics is fundamental. One piece of advice is to have this conversation as early as possible. Do not have this conversation with any agency or developer after you've launched the site. You'll just be paying for changes, for redevelopment, to be able to then start measuring this sort of stuff. If you get this information set out, manage expectations right from the start, it'll make the process a whole lot easier. So using Google Analytics, there's 3 types of goals or features in analytics to measure these goals from. The first one is a destination goal. A destination is essentially taking people to a specific page. And typically that would be a thank you page. So a thank you page is what users see after they've submitted or filled in a form. It could be a contact form, it could be a CPD booking form, it could be a sample request form, all these lead generation type goals that we've just talked about earlier on. The best thing about thank you pages is, and sometimes you may get agencies that says, oh yeah, we can just track clicks of the button. The problem with tracking clicks of a button is that you're prone to validation errors. Somebody types in a bogus email address, or it's not quite right. If you're clicking that button and you get an error, it's not actually a submission, but you've got a click of a button. So the best and most reliable way, in my opinion, is to take people to a unique thank you page. So this might be CPD thank you page. You might have another thank you page for sample requests. You may have another thank you page for an inquiries or callbacks. On that, the beauty of this is on that thank you page, you can then promote other areas of the site. So if somebody's booked a CPD, on that thank you page you may say, hey, here's our latest blog post, or here's our latest technical specification manual, or here's our latest how-to videos, or here's our latest case study. Just something that you're able to then promote to the user who's just submitted an inquiry. It's almost like thinking about upsell and cross-sell. They've bought into the brand, the content, your business, your product. What other little bits of information, content on your site can you give them to add value? The second type of goal is event, and the event is essentially a piece of code that goes onto your website. It sends data to analytics when somebody has clicked on something or done something that you want them to do. So this is more form filling, this is more user behavior, clicking on a play button, downloading a PDF, clicking on a link that you want people to click on. So these are event type goals, and this is done through event tracking, slightly different to the way destination goals are set up. And obviously if you're a transactional based site, you've got your usual e-commerce setup where you'll be tracking revenue, average order values, basket values, and other types of e-commerce metrics. So start off very, very simple. It may just be downloads and one particular type of form. Don't try and do everything all in one go. If you can, brilliant, but just start off very small and then just pick 1 or 2 different types of goals and start measuring. The key thing is to just get familiar with what goals are, a goal isn't, you know, somebody going to a contact us page. That's not a goal. A goal is somebody going to the contact us page and then some sort of action has been generated from it. Clicked on your email address, submitted an inquiry, or clicked on the map link, or whatever it may be. But it's not just a page view. It's got to be measuring some sort of outcome, some sort of action. So they're the 3 types of goals. Hopefully you can start off with some of those. So once you've got a couple of goals set up, you want to then be able to say, okay, well, how do we actually start improving on these goals? So you want to be measuring and plotting the number of downloads you're getting over a period of, say, 8 to 12 weeks, depending on how much traffic you get. You might have to wait a little bit longer if you've got very little volumes of traffic. But then if that's your benchmark level, you then need to be a little bit more smarter and saying, okay, well, how do we go about increasing sample requests? Let's choose sample requests as the example. So you may say, okay, well, the current design doesn't really lend itself to promoting our sample requests as heavy as it should be. So let's make it a little bit more prominent. Let's add some sidebar widgets. Let's put some header images. Let's maybe bold some text that in the body copy that says request a free sample. Let's be a little bit more punchy and a little bit more salesy. So you make these changes on your site, and then you come back 4 to 8 weeks later and you notice there's been an uplift of 40% just from making that one little change, or 2 or 3 little changes, but you're certainly heading in the right direction. And this is the whole purpose of setting these goals up, is to be able to then say, okay, well, how can we improve the website that we've built in order to make it easier for people to download, request samples. Maybe there's areas of the site that or documents that people aren't even discovering. So if downloads is your key metric and you discover that there's one particular PDF that always seems to get downloaded, why not make that more prominent? Why not, when people have downloaded that document, try and promote another document that kind of maybe is associated with that particular document? Again, you will see downloads increasing. And a little bit of a from my own personal experiences, one particular client who was very interested in measuring downloads of their technical specification documents for their products, and downloads for a number of years was very good, steadily growing, and then all of a sudden we came to a web redesign project. And what happened was the design, in terms of the call to action of where to download the documents, it changed from an accordion type download button. So you click on the or the button says downloads, and then you've got a list of PDFs. In order to reduce the height, the buttons had been condensed, so you had to click on the button for it to open. So the design was made and launched, and then we noticed that downloads started dropping off. And the reason for that is because of the simple design change from open box to a closed box, where the user then had to click on the button to open it up again. One little change like that can have a massive impact on your goal, your actual measurement of why this site exists. So you want to be measuring these goals, measuring all the changes and the impact it has on your specific goals as well. Hopefully that's been useful. If there's any questions, do tweet me at PriteshPatel9, drop me an email, chat@priteshpatel.me. Tune in for the next video. If there's anything or any topics that you want me to talk a little bit about, maybe I'd provide some hints and tips and some guidance, do let me know. Hope you've enjoyed this video. See you again next time.